Two true creepy apartment horror stories. My husband and I relocated to an apartment in 2019 after discovering I was expecting our daughter. We had previously lived in a duplex in a rough neighborhood for a few months, and although we didn't encounter any issues there, I was determined to leave because of the negative reputation of the city this neighborhood was in. I had selected a rental complex in my hometown, a place I was familiar with due to a cousin who had lived there. Our unit happened to be on the third floor, which wasn't our ideal choice, but it was the only available two-bedroom apartment at the time. Initially, things went smoothly for the first year. I had our daughter and adapted to life as a first-time mom. I couldn't recall exactly when we first met our neighbor, Greg, as I didn't care much about sharing his name. It's a common name. After all, Greg lived across the hall from us, was in his late 50s, and shared the apartment with his sister, which struck me as peculiar. There was something noticeably off about Greg, especially in the way he carried himself. I told my husband early on that there was something amiss with Greg, although I couldn't pinpoint the exact issue. Greg didn't come across as rude, harsh, or obnoxious, which one might expect from a troublesome person. Instead, he was insidious, which was even more unsettling. Over time, I noticed certain patterns about Greg. He was friendly with everyone, but he seemed to particularly engage with younger women, often those in their 30s or younger. His conversations with them were unusually long, making it awkward or difficult for them to exit the conversation gracefully. I found myself in such situations, and it made me extremely uncomfortable. It wasn't about what he said but rather how he conducted himself. He would do things like blocking the only exit to the laundry room, leaving me with no way to leave while we talked. He had a knack for always being in the hallway when I was leaving with my daughter. On some occasions, Greg would strike up conversations with my husband in the hallway as he returned from work, but he would then follow my husband into our apartment to continue the conversation. I was infuriated by this behavior and hoped my husband would notice and take action. However, Greg always managed to make it seem impolite to intervene. Looking back, I regret not being more assertive and making Greg leave. After all, who simply walks into someone's place uninvited? The pivotal day came about a month before we were planning to move out. The apartment complex had changed ownership, and we weren't certain how much they might raise the rent. Rather than inquiring, I just wanted to escape Greg. It had reached a point where I would double-check for people in the hallway before leaving our apartment. On this specific day, I had to work and was in a bathrobe, getting ready when there was a knock at the door. It was Greg, barging in uninvited once again, claiming that he needed our help. Thankfully, my husband was at home at the time, or I would have been extremely uncomfortable. When asked what he needed help with, Greg explained that he had been chatting with a woman online who had asked him for money. When he refused due to being broke, she threatened to post compromising pictures on his family's Facebook. I quickly realized that these pictures were of a sensitive nature. Greg handed me his phone so I could assist him in handling the situation. As I scrolled through the conversation, I stumbled upon something deeply disturbing about Greg, something I wished I had never seen. However, what followed was even more unsettling. The woman he was talking to appeared to be a teenage girl. This infuriated me, and I showed my husband, who inquired about her age. Greg's nervous reaction confirmed my suspicions. He claimed she looked about 30, which was unsettling for two reasons. First, Greg was old enough to be the father of a 30-year-old, and second, his response suggested he knew her true age but didn't want to admit it. At this point, I had to finish getting ready for work, so I went to the bedroom to change, while my husband continued the conversation, advising Greg to be cautious online. Greg asked if he should get rid of certain materials in his room, details of which I didn't want to know. I contemplated reporting him to the police as a potential predator, but I couldn't be certain of the girl's actual age, and our past encounters with law enforcement regarding internet crime hadn't yielded results. Looking back, that day validated the gut feeling I had harbored throughout the 3 years we lived there. I'm relieved we've moved out and no longer have to deal with Greg. He might not be a predator, but he's undoubtedly a creep I don't want my daughter to be around. It's better to be safe than sorry. Story 2. I'm a 24-year-old woman currently sharing an apartment with my 24-year-old female best friend, whom I'll call Sherry. Sherry has a large, furry black cat named Kane, who tends to visit my room occasionally. I'll share an incident that occurred one day, which left me puzzled. Sherry works night shifts, so I often spend my evenings alone. However, one evening when she had a day shift and was due home around 11 o'clock p.m., my boyfriend and I decided to prepare for bed and have some intimate time. It was around 9:30 p.m., and I knew Sherry would return soon, so I left Kane outside my room and closed the door securely, making sure it latched. About 20 minutes later, I heard my bedroom door open and close. I distinctly heard the latch engage, but my boyfriend and I assumed we had misunderstood the sound. 10 minutes later, we still heard some meowing, but we completed our activities. As we got up to head to the shower, I peeked out of my bedroom to check if Sherry had returned. To my surprise, I didn't see her, but I saw Kane outside my room. This left me perplexed because I was sure I had shut him out of my room, and I had heard the latch catch. I also heard my bedroom door open and close. Now convinced that Sherry was back, I checked around the apartment but couldn't find her. My boyfriend assumed Kane might have been hiding under the bed, but I was certain I had locked the door. I remembered hearing the door opening sound, and it troubled me. I had to continue getting ready for work, so I went to change in the bedroom. Meanwhile, my husband continued the conversation with Sherry, who had returned by then. Sherry explained that she had recorded a video of Chris and G fighting and it was all very disturbing. I could feel the tension building inside me and I knew this wasn't going to end well. Sherry sent the video to the apartment managers but they insisted it was an internal matter, leaving us feeling vulnerable. We decided to avoid Chris as much as possible, but we continued to witness his erratic behavior. G would occasionally come over, but their fights and loud encounters escalated. Things took a darker turn when we heard Chris hitting the walls and shouting while G was crying and screaming. It became increasingly unsettling, and we felt compelled to document their confrontations and alert the authorities. On a particularly distressing day, I arrived home from work to find Chris gone, which brought temporary relief. However, he returned a few days later, and his menacing behavior continued. The situation worsened with Chris's continued violence, loud outbursts, and intimidation towards us. It was a traumatizing experience, leaving us drained and apprehensive. Chris eventually moved out, but the impact of his menacing behavior continued to haunt us, affecting our mental well-being. In the end, we found solace in our new downstairs neighbors, a caring Puerto Rican grandmother and her adult grandchildren, who have been incredibly kind. It's our hope that they won't have to endure what we went through with Chris. Our wish is to leave behind the trauma and move forward in a safe, peaceful environment.